Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Got a good topic for you today with the longest title ever, so I'm going to paraphrase it right here. What's the creepiest thing that you have ever seen anywhere ever, no matter where it was? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was on a backwoods backpacking trip some years back with friends, and we stumbled upon a very makeshift and run-down cabin. There was no indication that anyone had been there in a while, but out back there was a hand-carved cross that looked like it used to be a grave marker. Also, several old food tins and some broken whiskey bottles. There's a wooded area I like to go hiking in, and there's a big teepee made of branches, and even though I know it was just made by other hikers, anytime it's abandoned anything in the woods, it just gives big Blair Witch blinds. I was walking into my parents' house through their deck door, and my reflection was me, but not. Hair was different, clothes were different. I looked like I'd been crying. I had made eye contact with the non-reflection, and she stared back. I had all my mirrors covered for at least a month afterwards. It was 2005. I was about 10 years old. My friend and I went back in his woods and found a pit with a rusty bathtub in the center. Surrounding it in a circle, sticks jabbed into the ground with dolls' heads on the ends. There was a tree there with a deer head hanging with the tongue sticking out with like 10 nails in each eye. We went back and I took pics of it with a disposable camera, but I don't know where that went. Never got developed. It sounds fake, I know, but I have no reason to lie. Freaky stuff. We went back in 2011 or so, and the woods kind of changed, and it was more of a swampland years later, but the tub was still there, and the deer head was still hanging in the tree. This was almost a decade ago. I live in a town outside of Phoenix, Arizona. It was late in the afternoon as the sun was starting to set. I went out in the backyard to smoke a cigarette and play fetch with my dog. As I was throwing the ball, I noticed a small orb shoot from the ground directly into the sky. A few seconds later, another one followed, and another, and another, and another. It didn't stop for a few minutes. At first, I thought it was a Roman candle, but I just couldn't hear, but you'd normally hear them fizzing as they fly. I couldn't hear anything. It was dead silent. To this day, I still don't know what those were. I and my mother were coming home from a Wednesday church Bible study. This was a weekly thing. We lived in a rural community, and we took the same route every time. This one Wednesday, halfway home, I see 6 to 7 small lights hovering in the distance over a tree line behind a farm. I got my mother's attention, and I begged her to stop the car at the farm driveway. The farm was within viewing distance. We get out of the car and watch light balls move up and down and right and left. I soon realized that they were a lot further away, so I started to walk. My mother screamed at me to get in the car. I had never seen her that terrified, so I got back in the car and we drove off. Never saw anything like that again, even though we never stopped taking that route. So what could all these other light sources be? Could it be planes? Could it be vehicles or house lights in the distance? What do you guys think? This just happened a week ago. In my bedroom, there's a small hallway that leads to the master bath. I had woken up in the middle of the night and was still in that twilight zone between sleep and awake. I looked down that dark hall, and clear as day was a little kid. The kid turned and looked at me and got one of those huge horror movie evil smiles on its face, and then it started running at me. I actually jumped out of the bed and screamed. It was gone. I woke up my cat, and she looked at me like I was crazy. It took a while to go back to sleep after that. There's a valley in Mexico in the middle of nowhere called Peña del Aire. I was told that you can see witches jumping from side to side if you go there at night. I went and actually got to see it myself. They looked like bright balls of light appearing and disappearing in different sides of the valley. They do it on hills and mountains too. I got the chance to see it again when visiting my husband's grandma, who lived in a rural area. Lots of people have different stories regarding these lights. My dad says they used to follow him when he used to walk home from work. Lived in an old colonial building for a bit. My closest door was always open every morning. I even had a chair in front of it a couple of nights in a row, and the damn door would be open every single morning. I moved out with the swiftness after the chair thing. There was a bridge that was a shortcut from my dorm to the cafeteria. I only walked over it once because the one time I did, I got the absolute worst feeling ever. Found a newspaper article where a girl had been barred and murdered under the bridge about 5 years previously. Still smells like cigarette smoke at my mom and dad's place sometimes. My dad's been dead for 13 years now. Nobody near or in that house currently smokes. He always smoked at the basement door because my mom wouldn't let him smoke in the house. But sometimes when I'm over and there, it just smells like someone's smoking a cigarette right beside me. I just posted one comment, but here's another one from almost 20 years ago. I was in St. Louis on a work trip. I was staying at some creepy hotel that gave real Shining vibes. It was really creepy. I felt uncomfortable in my room. I've had episodes of sleep paralysis since I was a kid, but they never bothered me until it happened in that hotel. I woke up at about 3 a.m. I remember clearly seeing that on the alarm clock. I was on my stomach with my arms at my side facing the clock radio and the door. I could see the hallway light coming in from under the door. I had this feeling like something was sitting on the small of my back. I couldn't move, but even if I could, I was too scared to try and look. My cell phone was on the bed in front of me, and I thought everything would be fine if I just called my mom. I couldn't move to get the phone. After a few minutes, I felt this cold pressure push into my lower back and shoot up toward my head and down toward my feet. I was able to move after that. I was there for a few more days and was so glad to get out of that hotel. My mom doesn't like driving on the highway, so when I was a teenager, we'd take the back way when visiting my grandparents. There was one town we'd always pass through that gave us the creeps. It was very small, no grocery store, no gas station, just some houses, a church, and a community center that was weirdly nowhere near the rest of the town. A lot of the main roads went near it, but not through it. It was the kind of place that most people didn't pass through. We never saw anyone on the street. Occasionally you'd see a shadowy figure peeking out from a porch, but that was it. There was a huge park with a nice-looking playground that we never saw a single child at. If vampires were real, this is definitely where they'd live. Once, me and my mom decided to drive down a side street in this town just to see what was there. We came across a car repair shop, which was weird because we never saw any cars there. And as soon as we approached, this guy came out. His face was not the shape of a normal human face. It was kind of lumpy. Obviously, some people have facial deformities, nothing scary about that, but there was something so unsettling about this guy. He stormed out and then just stopped and stared at us with the angriest look I've ever seen. It didn't help that this was the only human we'd ever seen outside in a town we'd driven through dozens of times. We quickly noped out of there and never explored that side street again. I love creepy little small town stories. I would love to know the name of the town if you happen to hear this. But what about you guys? Ever gone through one of those towns that maybe you shouldn't have gone through, or maybe a town that time forgot? When I was skiing in France, I went off-piste and got a bit lost. I had no cell phone reception, so as it got dark, I decided the most logical thing to do was ski carefully downhill toward any lights, which I assumed would be the resort. I got to a cabin, and at this point I was cold and dehydrated, so I knocked on the door. A group of normal-looking guys answered and welcomed me in, and we sat down and had a drink. One of them opened his laptop. He had just posted, "Girls of Reddit, what is the best way a guy can approach you in a bar?" I just ran. As a kid, I lived in a camper in the woods on my grandma's huge-ass property. I have no idea how much land she owned, but it was huge. Not like little kid version, wow this is huge, but actually huge. Grandma had a farm, including cows. A storm shut down the power, which shut down the electric fence, and a cow got out. So the next day, my teenaged cousin comes to go find the cow, and little 6-year-old me put on some snow boots and went with them. Again, this place is huge. We walked around for hours. Sometimes we would find what we thought might have been tracks, but then they would stop. Eventually, we get to a part where none of us had ever been. We weren't allowed because there was a super unruly creek. You slip and you're probably never found. We were about to turn back and give up when we saw a cow grazing. I was like, this isn't the cow we're looking for. How did it get here? We get closer, and this thing is wild, like borderline feral. It was not grazing on grass, but the cow we were looking for. Obviously, we booked it back to the house, thinking this cannibal cow was going to absolutely kill us. Like, they can't even do that, right? Tell Grandma what we found, and we thought she'd call us crazy. But her and their dad was like, was it almost completely black? Yes. Hard to tell because it was filthy, but I think so. Turns out there was a storm a couple years ago where a cow got out and they never found it. They assumed something in the woods ate it. They figured that's what happened to this cow too, but let us go look anyways for funsies. Well, it was getting eaten in the woods by the other cow. They went to try and find it in a cow carcass, and they found the carcass. Cow had been struck by lightning and was dead before the cannibal cow ate it, and it didn't eat much at all, but to us kids it looked like a lot. Anyways, that's the first time I saw a dead cow, and the first and only time I saw a cow eating another cow. No clue what happened to Cannibal Cow. Oh, also, same property, 5 people murdered. Also, not the first time an animal got hit by lightning. Grandma had a blind pony that was blinded because it was hit by lightning. Mostly blind anyways. I think it could kinda still see. It died years later because they think maybe just age, but it went deaf and fell down a hill and died. The creepiest thing I've seen in a small town was a specific car and tan van following me and my friend. We were walking alone in a somewhat empty parking lot. The tan van ended up pulling up to my friend and I, but we couldn't see inside because the windows were black. The van stayed in that spot for 30 seconds at a dead stop. They could have been taking pictures. We were young teens. Pretty sure we were the targets of an S ring because that whole ordeal kept happening for a little over 45 minutes. They sped off when I guess they thought they couldn't snatch us. I was anchored out in Georgian Bay, spending a few days on a boat. We were far away from everything, just us. The only way in was a long boat ride. We were the only ones there. My dad and I decided to go to shore and have a fire. After sitting around for a while, we heard this scream coming from the woods that was basically the sound of a lady being murdered. High-pitched, panic-stricken screaming. No idea what it was to this day. Someone told me it could have been a fox, but that seems crazy to me. Foxes don't scream like that from what I know of. Anyways, it was weird and creeped me out. I just moved to a town in northern Iowa, and I'll give you a hint, Murky Pond. So, it was around 6 years ago, and I was in the shower. It was one of those pod showers with those glass doors, so while I was taking a shower, I looked up at the door, and my dad was standing there. I had locked the door. It was one of those moments where you don't blink because you know that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So I was staring at him, and when I eventually blinked, he was gone. I threw on a towel and ran downstairs to find Mom and Dad sitting at the table. Dad was never upstairs. Sorry for my grammar. Basic grammar was never my strong suit. This happened about 10 years ago, so I don't remember exactly, but I remember being in bed about to go to sleep. Then out of nowhere I saw a flash of light. Out of the corner of my eye, a white glowing orb was just existing there. I was incredibly effing confused, but still scared, so I just closed my eyes and tried to forget about it. I genuinely had no idea what it was. It could have been something as simple as a car headlight, or it could have been an effing demon, but to this day, I have no idea. Balmoria, Texas. Stopped by there to sleep on a road trip, and when we got to the 11 hotel, things got weird. Here's the review I posted. It tells the story. Rolled into Balmoria early this morning at about 1:30. The town is tucked about 3 miles from the interstate, so it was dead quiet, to the point where my ears were ringing. The office was locked, looked empty, and no one answered the phone. Yet there were parked vehicles, and I could hear the murmur of TVs in several of the rooms. After walking around outside in the freezing cold, Exhausted and hoping to find the owner or manager, I gave up when I heard the sound of the screaming livestock coming from the direction of the town cemetery. Got the hell out of there, but pulled into a dirt lot closer to the edge of town. I'm locking the doors and hoping to get at least an hour or two of sleep in this desolate, haunting shithole of a town. 4.8 stars my ass. Amazing hospitality? Psh. Best kept secret in West Texas? Yeah. Creepiest place in Texas that will leave you wondering, where do they hide the dead bodies? If I said the name of the town wrong, I'm sorry, but if it is Belmoria, sounds quite quaint and completely creepy. This happened 6 months or 5 years ago. I believe it was late afternoon when it happened, unless it was shortly after midnight or before 10:30 a.m. I was engaging in the customary activity when I noticed an item. I was all alone except for the people who may have been in the vicinity with me. The item was distinctive in a way that was both difficult to describe and unpleasant to contemplate. The only thing I recall with certainty is that the experience was completely unforgettable. Very funny.